Hi.
Hi, all our friends. It has been a while and I missed you. I hope you had a good start to the new year, all considered. I'm happy to be back with more episodes. We hope you enjoyed them.
Yes, we really do. We took a bit of a break, which was much needed, and we are very excited to share our new set of episodes with you. And also notice that we have several new subscribers. So hello and welcome, and we're very glad to have you with us.
Yes, welcome.
So to kick off our next round of episodes, we're starting with a conversation with someone who's very special, not just because she does really cool work, but because she is...
Because she's my best buddy of 12 years. She's an amazing friend.
Yeah, so this wonderful friend and our guest for this episode is Dr. Liz Henderson. And the title she gave me is Bioacoustic Scientist with NIWC Naval Information Warfare Center, Pacific, and proud best buddy of Mr. Danny Whitty. So Liz and I were in grad school together at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and I'd sent an email out to the graduate student listserv asking if anyone wanted to be Danny's best buddy, because the waiting list to get an officially assigned best buddy through the program was so long. And I got lots of nice but not very helpful replies, and I just was kind of resigned to the fact that no one at Scripps was going to be able to be his best buddy. And then maybe a couple of weeks later, I ran into Liz in the hallway, and she was like, "Tara, are you still looking for a best buddy for your brother?" I was at sea, I was on a research cruise, and I couldn't really easily answer my emails, but I'd love to do it. And so that was, I don't know, maybe in 2008, 2009, and you guys have been best buddies ever since.
Yes, I'm so lucky.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm so lucky. We are such good friends.
Yeah, you guys do all sorts of things together. Hiking, going to the beach, kayaking, before COVID, bowling, going to the movies. Yeah, it's such a nice friendship.
I'm lucky to have her in my life.
Yeah. I know she feels the same way about you.
I really enjoyed learning more about her work for this episode.
Yeah, me too. Even though we were in graduate school together, we never really talked much about our different research areas. For you, what was one of the more interesting or memorable things you learned from this conversation?
It was so good to learn about beaked whales.
Yeah, they're a really interesting group of animals, and you'll learn more in the interview. Anything else?
It is a spoiler if I say now.
All right, no spoilers. You just have to wait and see.
Yes, you will see.
Yep. Anything else you want to share with our viewers about this conversation, about Liz? Anything else?
Yes, I want to say that this friendship changed my life. It truly brought me joy when I felt so alone. You can make a huge difference just by being kind.
Yeah, that's such an important message to share. Just showing basic kindness to people can have such an effect, more than you might ever know.
Yes, such a difference. I also want to say that she does such important work to ensure that marine mammals are not harmed by naval sonar.
Yeah, I think some people might be surprised to learn that studying marine mammal sounds is somehow related to Navy activities, but Liz will explain more in the interview. But it's really important work and really interesting work.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I want to show you all that Liz and I were good friends before I could communicate by letterboard.
Yeah, you were friends for many years before you started using the letterboard.
She connected to me without having access to my words. That is very important for you all to know.
Yeah.
We non-speakers need friendship even if we can't say it.
Yeah, despite the stereotypes about autistic people and despite what you might think from a non-speaker who can't easily show or vocalize their interest. From what I've seen, most of your speller friends really appreciate and crave friendship, and they're also really great friends.
So don't be sad to show us kindness, even if you're not sure how to interact with us.
Yeah, even if you might not be entirely sure, as Danny says, how to interact with non-speakers. Just show kindness, just show interest. It goes a long way.
Absolutely. With that, please enjoy it.
Enjoy.
Enjoy.
The water and salt in the sea is also in you and me. The waves come and go, and we are pushed to grow. But we can see with our hearts there's more than the sum of its parts. Let's go.
Ready to go, Danny?
Hi, my best. I'm my best buddy. I'm my best buddy.
Hi, my best buddy. It's nice to see you.
You too. You are a very special. You are a very special guest.
Thank you, Danny. I feel very honored to be here. I have really been enjoying watching your previous podcasts, and so I'm pretty proud to be a guest on one.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
great to see you.
It's great to see you too.
Yeah.
I know we've gotten to see each other a little bit during the pandemic, but it's been mostly on Zoom, and that's at least been nice.
Yeah. How long have you guys been best buddies now?
I think January will be 12 years.
Oh my gosh, Dan.
Can you believe it?
Wow, yeah.
Look so young,
Can you say it again?
and we still look so young.
That's right. We don't look a day older, do we?
Uh-huh.
I'm eager to learn more about your work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to share it with you, Danny. I know we talk about a lot of things when we hang out, but work isn't necessarily one of them. So it'll be fun to talk about it.
I want to start with a question about your journey to marine biology.
Sure. Fire away.
How did you get into?
Here you come. All right, mister.
How did you get into it?
Well, it's an interesting question, Danny, because as you know, I come from Colorado. And so I did not grow up with the ocean or by the ocean, but my grandparents lived in Florida. And so I think there must have been something as a kid and going and visiting them and going to the beach that sparked my early interest, because I knew I wanted to study animal behavior, but really by college, I knew it was marine mammal behavior and biology. And it was pretty well set, even, going into college. So something somewhere must have sparked my interest, but it's hard to say exactly what.
I wonder if you could feel the wind calling you.
Yeah, maybe on some level. That's a good way to look at it, Danny. I like that.
Did you start studying science?
So when Judd and I moved to San Diego, so that he could go back to school, I was just looking to get involved in marine mammal research activity in San Diego. And a friend of mine was in the acoustics lab at Scripps, and she had me come out on a couple of their cruises just to help out. And that was my first experience really with the tool of bioacoustics and studying marine mammal vocalizations, and it really got me thinking about what you could do with that. And for me, it became kind of a window into their behavior underwater. And it allows us to kind of assess what they're doing, see where they are, see how they're behaving when we can't see them. And so that was how I got involved in bioacoustics and using sound. And I guess I haven't stopped using that tool.
I'm going to get straight to the point. Tell me about the new species of whales.
Are you as excited as I am about it, Danny? 'Cause I am pretty excited.
It is so good.
It is. I saw the headlines and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And then you're like, it was me in the group I was with. It's like, what? So cool.
Yeah, it was really exciting. So I think we talked about this, but I'll just give you guys a very quick backstory. So we had planned this trip and we started planning it this last January. So, really before COVID had even gotten going. And the idea was that all beaked whales make a unique type of echolocation click, and it has a unique frequency sweep and duration and different characteristics that allows us to tell which click belongs to which species of beaked whales. But because beaked whales are so elusive visually, there are a few species that have either rarely been sighted or never sighted and are only known based on stranded animals. And there are also some acoustic detections of beaked whale clicks where we haven't visually matched them with their species. So we have ideas about what species and what clicks go together based on known distributions. And so that was the point of this trip, is there's a beaked whale click type. It's called the BW43 because its center frequency is 43 kilohertz. And it's been recorded off Southern California and then more recently off of Baja. And it was thought to be Perrin's beaked whale based off that animal's distribution. But again, Perrin's is one of the species that's only known from 5 carcasses that are stranded in the last, I think, 30 years. So very little is known about it. We assume it's distribution, but we don't know how wide it is. And so that was the point of this expedition, was to go down, find the Perrin's beaked whale, record the BW43 click and say, okay, there it is. Now we can confirm that. And instead, we found what we think might be a completely new species of beaked whale that has a different vocalization altogether. And yeah, so that was incredibly exciting. We could not have possibly predicted that was going to happen. And so, yeah, we just have to stand by for the genetics to find out if it's really a new species.
That's so cool.
Wow!
Oh, yeah, wow.
And how did it feel at that time?
Well, when we first saw them, we were assuming what we were seeing were the Perrin's beaked whale. So we were very, very excited. But, we thought, okay, we did our job check. And then after the encounter, we went back and we were reviewing the photos and we realized that the teeth were in the wrong place for Perrin's beaked whales. And then we started looking closer at the photos and realized that all of the color patterns put together didn't match any of the described color patterns for any of the known species. And then when we looked at the acoustic data and realized that the click was actually different, we got very, very excited. And so it wasn't all at once. It was over the course of about 2 or 3 days of reviewing all the data and looking at guidebooks and looking at papers and looking at the data again. And then when we kind of finally, looked at each other and said, this might be a new species, that was an incredible feeling. That was a really exciting moment.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I was wondering, like, how long was it, like, listening and like, oh, this is something new, or was it something that unfolded?
Yeah, it really unfolded because the center frequency is actually right around 43. So at the very first look, it was, okay, it's 43. But then upon a closer look, there was some other characteristics of the click that came out and actually are consistent with every time we recorded that group. And we got, I think, 5 or 6 different group recordings. So we only saw the group once, but we recorded them multiple times. And every time those characteristics are the same. So we're pretty confident that it is a new click. So it's pretty cool.
Incredible!
It's incredible.
I agree, Danny. It is very incredible.
So Danny, had you heard of beaked whales before? Do you know what they are? Other than whales with beaks? NIWC.
No, but yeah.
Yeah. Maybe could you explain a little?
Yeah, for
beaked whale
sure.
Basics.
So beaked whales are a group of species that are unique for a few different reasons. The main thing, and the reason that they get the term beaked whale, is because they do have a pronounced rostrum or beak. But what's unique about them is that they only ever develop one pair of teeth, and it's in the lower jaw. And only in males do those teeth actually erupt up. And they erupt on the outside of the mouth. So unlike our teeth, where if we close our mouths, we don't see them, these teeth actually come out over the upper lip. And in each species, where those teeth are along the jaw and how big they are and how arched that lower jaw is are some of those characteristics where we tell one species from the other. But the reason that beaked whales are so difficult to see visually is because they are really extreme deep divers. They dive down to 1,000 meters, 2,000 meters. In fact, a record-breaking paper that just came out this year found a tagged beaked whale go to 3,000 meters deep, which is very, very deep. And it's a very long dive, as you can imagine. So they have to hold their breath for a really long time, typically at least an hour, if not more. And then when they're at the surface, you'd think they would be at the surface a long time because they just did such a deep dive, but they really just surface for a brief period, just a minute or two. And then they do a series of shorter dives. So in the case of the group that we encountered, it was between about 5 and 13 minutes where they would be down, and then they would come up for a minute or two and breathe and go down and then come up. And they do that. So that was about an hour and a half. And then they go back and they do another long deep dive. And so that's why they're really difficult to find visually. So you have to have really good conditions, really flat, calm seas, and it's good if you're quiet. Our boat happened to be very quiet, so they weren't for effortless. So it was pretty amazing. But yeah, as a group of species, they're pretty cool. They're pretty unique.
They're kind of funny looking. I'll show you some
They're
pictures.
really funny looking.
So amazing.
Yeah, I think it's when I first started learning about marine mammals, a friend gave me a marine mammal guide in college. And I remember reading the beaked whale section. Like, what is this? And even some of the other stuff, like even the, even the baleen whales, the dolphins, the porpoises, like seeing how much we actually still have to learn about these large charismatic animals, it kind of blew my mind at the time.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's something maybe the general public realizes, is that we don't know a whole lot about a lot of these animals, especially.
Yeah, it's very, very true. And you're right. Even the ones that are very big, blue whales, which are the biggest animal on the planet, we know very little about their behavior and where they go. Do they migrate? Things like that. And in fact, I just read a new species of blue whale was actually also just found in the Indian Ocean. And that's the biggest animal on the planet. So we definitely still have a lot to learn about marine mammals, and the fact that we can still find new species, that we can discover new things about their behavior. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's, just kind of it keeps me full of wonder. There's still a lot of discovery to be made.
That's a good way to put it.
Exactly. It's done.
Done.
I'm so stupid for you.
That's nice.
Thanks, Danny. That means a lot. I appreciate it.
I'm proud to. No.
After W.
I'm proud to know you.
I'm proud to know you.
I am pretty proud to know you too, Danny. This is my first podcast ever. So I think you're pretty amazing doing this and sharing your ocean journey with everybody as well. So we're just cool people.
Socks.
Shucks.
Socks.
Oh, Danny.
TPARTOFMY.
You're an important part of my journey.
Oh, thanks, Danny. I'm glad. I saw the photo of us at the beach in your last podcast episode. That was pretty fun. That was a while ago. I think.
Yeah, it was.
You brought me to the beach. So much, and kayaks. My lazy bum so much.
Oh, I love it. I love kayaking with you. We always have so much fun. And I don't mind paddling. It's fine.
It's a good workout.
It is a good workout, actually.
HOPE.
I hope to go stronger.
Well, you are clearly working on it with all of the snorkeling and paddleboarding and everything that you've been doing. You are definitely going to be stronger and more comfortable in the ocean. So cool. And Danny, one thing I remember from all of our times at the beach is even before you were able to communicate through spelling, you always had such a great sense of wonder about the ocean and the beach. And I remember we would like just go explore and we'd dig up crabs, and you know, you were always curious, even when you couldn't tell us how curious you were. You always definitely saw the ocean through eyes of wonder and of joy, and I think that's the coolest thing. And so now to hear you talk about it is just so special. I'm so glad that we get to know how you're feeling these days.
Yeah, and that's so cool that you could notice that, Liz. That's
Yeah,
really great.
for sure.
ITMEANS.
It means so much that you noticed.
Definitely.
Definitely. And what do you like about the ocean?
I mean, I like, gosh, I don't know. That's a good question. I like that it's unknown. I like that we still are learning so much about it. I like exploring the ocean, like you have been lately, snorkeling or scuba diving and seeing everything that's under the water. I like all the animals in the ocean. I like learning about them and listening to them and trying to help protect them. You know, it's so important. The more we learn about marine animals, I think we're learning more about our impacts on them. We've learned so much about you know, plastics in the ocean, and we know about noise pollution in the ocean, and you know, things like acidification, and these are all things that we've done and we've introduced. And so I love the ocean, and I want to keep it as pristine as possible and keep it healthy. And I think that's a big important thing for us to do as humans.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah, it is so true. Okay.
I wonder about the boats you use.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I have done research from a lot of different kinds of boats. My favorite, how I prefer to work, is just a small boat where it's just me and a couple of people and we're just out for the day and then we come back in. You get so close to the animals that you're studying and you really kind of feel a part of what they're doing, which I love. But I've also worked on big ships, big research vessels from either Scripps or NOAA. And I worked, the ship that we were just on with the beaked whales was actually a sailboat. And that was my first time on a live aboard sailboat. And that was amazing. It was a beautiful ship, beautiful old wooden sailboat. It was awesome. And then I don't know if you remember this, Danny, because my last trip was right before we started hanging out. But I did a bunch of my PhD work from the Flip, which is a crazy kind of vessel that it gets towed out. It's the floating instrument platform, and it gets towed out, and then it actually fills up with water and flips up, and then it's a platform that you live on and work from for however long. And so, yeah, I've had some pretty unique boats and vessels and platforms that I've gotten to work off in my day. But I think my favorite are the small boats. My favorite are being right there with the animals.
I've only ever seen Flip from the outside, and I haven't spent much time on research cruises, thankfully, because I get super seasick. But
Oh no!
Small boats only for me. But can you? I'm sure you've had to do this a lot of times. Can you describe what it's like when Flip flips? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So the buoy part of it is 300 feet, and then the live aboard part is about 50 feet, and the buoy part is filled with tanks, and they fill up with water in a sequence, and that's what flips it. And then on the inside, everything is on like a gimbal. So the entire galley, which is the kitchen, is basically on one big gimbal. So it's all hangs from a bar, basically. So your stove and your sink and everything is kind of just hanging, and your beds hang, and everything hangs. And you tighten it, obviously, when you're in place, but to flip, you loosen everything. And so when it flips, everything just swings. And so it goes from one direction to the other. And the exceptions to that are the sinks in the bathroom are built like this. So there's two sinks. So when you flip, it just is like that. And then the toilet, you actually have to like physically move from one hole to the other. But everything else, if I recall, everything else pretty much swings. But the craziest thing is loading up the equipment, because you have to load everything to be in the orientation when you flip. So you basically load everything and strap everything down sideways. And so that when you flip, then everything is upright, and then you can like access all your gear and stuff. So it's just, yeah, it takes a little bit to kind of wrap your head around. It's very strange, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's such a marvel. I loved hearing about it.
Yeah.
Strict. It is incredible what you do. Can you share a typical day in the field?
Sure. I think it's kind of different depending on the project. But for example, this beaked whale project that we were just on, we get up with the sun. Actually, we get up before the sun so that we're ready to go. So at sunrise, we're out on the deck with our binoculars, and we take positions so that we're scanning all angles so we can see 360 degrees around the vessel. And for a project like that where you're just looking for an animal in the water, we spend the whole day just watching the water. And so we rotate through so your eyes get a break, but we literally just spend the entire day staring at the water and searching for animals. And so it's not the most glamorous or exciting work, but then for the hour long that you have with the animals, it's amazing. And at that point, then we bring the cameras out and we're taking pictures, and we're putting in the acoustic recorders into the water, and all the different tools. For something like the humpback whale project that I was on, where we were satellite tagging humpback whales, That's a little bit different. That's the small boat work. So we are on shore, we come home every night, but then in the morning again, we're up and we're in the boat before dawn, so that at dawn we're heading out. And with something like humpback whales in Hawaii, they're a little bit easier to find. They're pretty plentiful. So we get out there and then we, you know, try to find some that we can work with. And, you know, we take pictures of their flukes because that's how you identify each individual animal. And again, sometimes we do acoustic recording. Sometimes we're trying to find out where the singers are. So we're recording for that. So yeah, I guess it's hard to say what a typical day is because every day is kind of different and every project is different. So a lot of time staring at the water for sure and listening to what's going on under the surface. That's pretty consistent.
Yeah.
This sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Pretty great. Yeah, it's pretty nice to be out on the water every day. Just, you know, even days you don't see anything, it's just nice to be out there and to be enjoying it. And I think it would be a challenge to do field work every single day of the year. It's nice to have breaks and to have it be a special thing, but it is pretty wonderful when we're out there for sure.
It is a dream job for many.
Yes, definitely. I cannot tell you how many times people tell me, I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was a kid. And so, yeah. It's pretty special to actually live that dream, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Are you eager to be a famous biologist?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I want to be famous. I would like, when things are all said and done, for my work to be known. I would like to have made a difference in the world, you know, and helped change things for the better, helped with conservation or helped with, you know, protecting marine species in some way. But I don't think famous is the thing that I'm looking for, just to make a difference.
I'm wondering why you asked that question, Danny. Is she going to be famous after this interview?
I know, maybe this is my gateway to fame.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Yes, indeed.
Ask because I've been wondering about fame in conservation and how it is often passed toward self-promoters.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Danny. And I think that's really true. I think there are certain personalities that like to be in front of a camera and like to put themselves out there and like to be the face of something. And, you know, if it's for a good cause, if it's for conservation, maybe that's not such a bad thing. You know, we need all kinds. We need people that don't love being in front of the camera to do the work, but, you know, we need those people that like to draw attention to an issue as well. But I do think you're right. And I think especially in today's culture, we sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not promote, but we ascribe some power or, well, fame really to people that like to put themselves out there. And we now have a thing called influencer, which is the most bizarre thing in the world to me, because you're literally famous for promoting something. And that's just a really strange concept that we have nowadays. So yeah, I think you're really right about that, Danny. I think that people that are self-promoters are probably going to get a lot more attention, but if it's for a good cause and if it's for the right reasons, I think that's probably a useful person to have around.
Yeah. What do you think?
That is true.
Mm-hmm.
That is also why I want to interview people like you who do the important work.
Thank you, Danny. I appreciate that. And I'm super happy to talk to you about my work and get the information out there. I think that's really cool.
There'll be more about conservation in your work?
Well, so the main thing that I do for my job is because I work for the Navy, and so I sort of record and assess acoustic impacts on marine mammals, particularly impacts from the Navy, so sources like sonar or ship noise or things like that. And so my job is to try to assess how loud some of those sounds are, how animals might be perceiving those sounds, and how animals might be responding to those sounds. And then that work and the work of so many other people then gets fed into the environmental compliance documents that the Navy does, where they actually have to seek a permit from National Marine Fisheries Services to do training and testing in US waters. And so the Navy has to estimate how many impacts it's going to have on the mammals. And those impacts go all the way from just a very minor behavioral response up to, potentially an animal stranding and dying because of some activity. And so we really have to have a really as best understanding as possible of that spectrum of impacts, and then how to mitigate the more, intense impacts and minimize those, reduce those, have people looking out on the ships so that if there's animals nearby, they turn sonar off, things like that. And so, I think that's super important because we want to make sure that, I talked about this already, that humans are reducing our impacts on marine mammals, and the Navy does a lot of activity in the ocean, and so they want to be as conservative as possible with their impacts as well, which I think is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing that your work has such important impacts.
Well, like I said, it's the work of a lot of people. There's a lot of effort that goes into our understanding of how marine mammals respond to noise. So it's not just my work. It's a lot of people that do a lot of hard work to get to where we are now and where we hope to get in the future.
I've wondered this, how kind of applicable are these kind of military, Navy-specific studies to other forms of noise impacts in the ocean?
I think some kinds of studies are pretty broadly applicable and some are not. Some things are so specific, like sonar, like Navy sonar is pretty specific to the Navy. But if we think about it, there's things like echo sounders, there's pingers that are supposed to prevent animals from getting entangled in nets. There's a lot of acoustic pinging sounds out there that maybe aren't exactly like sonar, but there are similarities enough where we can apply in both directions. So we can say, what do we know about marine mammal responses to echo sounders and how that might apply to sonar, and vice versa. And then there's other sounds like air guns, which are totally a different kind of sound, and they're actually more similar to almost like an explosive sound. They're really broadband sounds, and so those are a little bit harder to apply across different studies, but again, provide information about how animals respond to a specific sound type. So some of the work is kind of broadly applicable and some of it is not so much, but it all builds up to a body of knowledge of how animals are responding to noise in their environment. So I think it's all useful.
Yeah.
What is the coolest sound you have encountered?
Man, marine mammals make some really interesting sounds underwater, and some that you would never believe actually came from a marine mammal. Some of the walruses and Arctic seals, and Antarctic seals for that matter, make some crazy sounds that sound like spaceships or aliens or something. They're really, really bizarre sounds, and I would never have said that they came from an animal, but they do. So I think that's probably the coolest sound I've ever encountered.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah.
Let's see, Jen, and that's 2, I think. Yeah, this is it. But do you want to respond to what Liz responded.
It's absolutely amazing.
Mhm.
It is absolutely amazing to hear.
Thanks, Danny. Um,
I wonder what your favorite marine animal is.
that's a tough question. I know everybody loves them, but I really do love humpback whales. They're pretty amazing. Just so beautiful and graceful and sing these amazing songs, and they're awesome. Oh my gosh, I like so many different species. I actually was reminded when we were in Mexico, we had some Pacific white-sided dolphins that came up close to us, and that was one of the species I studied for my PhD. And I had forgotten how fun they were to watch and how much personality they have. So I would say that's another favorite animal.
I have to admit, I forget about them. I occasionally, twice have run into them. I'll stand up paddleboarding far off of La Jolla, but I do kind of forget about them. There's the commons, and then there's the bottlenose.
Right? The ones that always come up close.
That's cool that they have a lot of personality.
Yeah, they do. I always think of different dolphin species as kind of different ages. So like common dolphins to me are like little kids, right? Because they're always like splashing around and leaping around and they run all over the place. And then I feel like Pacific white-sided dolphins are like, you're like older teenagers are in their 20s where they're still, playful and they still have fun, but they're a little bit more serious. And then you have like the bottlenose dolphins, which are just adults and they're very serious. And every once in a while they have fun, but for the most part, they're very slow and they take everything very seriously. And then Rizzo's dolphins are like the grandparents because they go very slow and they're very sedate and they're very calm. And yeah, I don't know.
I love that.
That's just me. I just attribute these personalities to all different species.
I think that's so cool. W-O-W-I-L-O-E-E.
Wow, I love it.
Yeah, I love it too.
Thanks, guys.
Well, I think
Kind
it's
of
so
silly,
cool.
but fun.
It's cool to feel familiar enough with species to be able to think things like that,
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty fun way to, I don't know, to categorize them.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously don't want to anthropomorphize animals or, give them human characteristics to their detriment, but I do think it's fun sometimes to think of their personalities in different ways.
Whereas the Irrawaddy dolphins I've studied, we just call them jerks because they're kind of tricky.
Yeah, they just kind of pop up, right? And then that's it.
You have no idea where they're going to pop up next.
Yeah.
Yeah, and tiny little fins. Ugh. I am.
I'm so excited to hear your thoughts on inclusion in the ocean.
Yeah, I think that's a really important topic that I don't think really gets talked about a lot. And I know you guys kind of mentioned this in your last podcast about sort of social justice issues related to, ocean access. And I think that's really important. So not only talking about inclusion of people with, disabilities or different ways that they approach the ocean, but also the ability for people to access the ocean is really important. And in California, particularly here in San Diego, the ocean used to be native land, and the natives had this very close relationship with the ocean. And as white people came in and we pushed them further and further away from the ocean, they've lost a lot of that relationship. And not only native people, but people of color too, tend to get pushed away from the ocean because ocean neighborhoods tend to be affluent and white. So I think thinking about inclusion when it comes to the ocean is so important in so many different ways, because we do have to make sure it's accessible to everybody, no matter how you are physically able to get there, no matter how you're mentally able to think about it, no matter what color your skin is. the ocean should be available to everybody equally. And so I think that's really, really important, Danny, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah.
It is so important to me that you brought me to the sea even before you knew I could communicate.
Well, first of all, Danny, I think in some ways you've always been able to communicate. Obviously not as clearly as you are doing right now, but I think you've always been able to express yourself, and you've always been clear about what you like, what you don't like, what you want to do, what you don't want to do, what's important to you. So yeah, I think that you are communicating in a way that more people can understand you now than just people that are close to you. But I think you've always been a communicator to some degree. But that said, yes, I loved all of our times going to the beach and going to the sea and going kayaking. It's always so special, whatever we do. And I hope we get to do a lot more of it. I'm excited to come snorkel with you guys one of these days. That is going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think you'll be impressed.
I can tell. Yeah. Awesome.
Louder?
I hope so.
Me too.
You're awesome.
I agree.
You're awesome, Danny.
Um,
Pretty happy that we've been friends for so long.
yeah, I still remember the conversation we had. Like you found me in the hallways in Ritter. You're like, are you still looking for a best buddy for your brother? I was like, yeah. Did you come back? Yeah, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pretty fun journey. Had a lot of good times.
Definitely.
Yep.
It's meant a lot to Danny.
Yeah, me too.
And us too. SOMUCH.
So much.
Me too, Danny.
Anything else you want to say to Liz or ask Liz?
What can people do about those impacts to marine mammals?
Well, we can just try and make everything a little quieter. The biggest source of noise in the ocean is shipping traffic. And there are efforts to try and make those ships quieter, but the industry is so huge and there's so much money involved that outfitting or retrofitting ships or making new ships that are quieter, it's expensive, and companies don't want to do it because they don't want to have to bear that cost. And so it's kind of an ongoing battle to get ships quieter. But then, there's lots of other sources of noise as well. And, the Navy sonar is an important one, but it's actually a really small one compared to things like, seismic exploration, oil and gas industry noises. Yeah, there's a lot of sources of noise. So I don't know, what can the average person do? I'm not really sure. Maybe look for petitions that could be signed to advocate for reducing noise, to help push shipping companies to make their ships quieter, maybe reduce some of the seismic exploration that's going on right now in a lot of areas. I'm not really sure what we can all do, but I think just being aware of how much noise is out there probably is a good first step. And then we can just try to write letters or call our politicians or sign petitions or whatever there might be to help get those things quieted down.
Yeah, that's a new one, but that's a good question, Danny.
It's a really good question. Sometimes that's so frustrating, just not knowing what we can do, having one thing that we can do always helps, I think, make us feel like we have a little bit more power and ownership over these problems.
Mm-hmm. Although I think the awareness is important, because a lot of these sources you listed, they also have a lot of other negative impacts on the environment. And with globalization, it's hard. You can't even trace where a lot of the stuff one buys comes from. So it's really hard to be a responsible consumer, but got to start somewhere. And even just being cognizant of the footprint of buying something off of Amazon,
Right?
for example, and trying to be more mindful where accessible to you, I think is a good step. It might not seem that monumental, but I think it's a lot better than nothing. And without that first step, nothing else can happen. So
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Y-E-S.
Yes.
I-T-I-S.
This is
T-O.
this is stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
Are you hopeful for our oceans?
I am hopeful, Danny. I think we have to keep some hope. It's too easy to get overwhelmed with all the issues. I do. I'm hopeful. I think, like you guys were just saying, being aware of the issues is so important, and I think you guys are doing a great job of getting the word out. And I think we have to have hope because that's gonna make us take that next step. So I am hopeful.
Just a quick question. Just a quick question. What about inclusion? I mean, we know there's issues with inclusion in marine biology and conservation in general. What does it look like in your kind of area of specialty, like with acoustics of marine mammals? I know that's quite a niche, but
yeah, I mean, it is really niche, but I think it's important. It's just as important to have inclusion, in these tiny little focus niches as it is in broader things. And it's probably harder to get there too, because, as you guys are well aware, inclusion has to start really far back. You can't start to be inclusive at the level of people that have PhDs and that you're hiring. You have to start way back and include people from all backgrounds and all abilities at the start, because then they have equal footing the whole way, and then they will have equal opportunities to get places in life, even in little bioacoustic niches. But yeah, I think inclusion is hugely important, and I think we have to really start from the beginning. We have to start with young kids. We have to really overhaul our education systems from the ground up, not only at the college level and at the intern level and, at the graduate school level, but really from the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's a solid point. My goodness, you're almost done with this narwhal, Danny.
Well, thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
This was such a pleasure. I'm so excited and I'm happy to have been a part of it.
You. Thank you.
Thank you. You're definitely
You.
the top of Danny's list.
I feel so honored, Danny.
Y-E-S.
Yes.
I-A-M-S-O.
I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky to have you in my life.
I am too, Danny. I feel pretty blessed.
Yeah.
Thank you, and see you soon.
See you guys soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, this.
Have a
Oh,
good
Bye,
what
night.
guys.
Bye.
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 End
And
meeting today.
What we can see with our hearts is more than the sum of its parts. What we can see with our hearts is more than the sum of its parts.